Greetings, everyone. My name is Jordan Postorino. I'm a producer, a songwriter, and a mix engineer from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. One of the artists that I work really closely with is LØLØ. And so what I thought we could do today is have a look through her song, Debbie Downer. Debbie Downer is one of her more well-known songs. It came out last year, 2022. And it's quickly become one of her flagship songs. And I've had a lot of people ask me, what the production process looks like with LØLØ. What kind of methods do we have? What are we really doing in the studio? And so I thought I would do a little production deep dive on Debbie Downer and give everyone a bit of a peek under the hood of what, a LØLØ production looks like. So I've got the session up here in Ableton. I work in Ableton pretty exclusively. We will ferry back and forth between Ableton and Pro Tools when we're recording, but generally speaking, when we're getting sounds, when we're, working the arrangement, things like that, we'll do a lot of that in Ableton. What I guess we can do is, we'll play the track from the top, we'll listen all the way through, and then we'll start diving in. So here is Debbie Downer.
Going to the party on Friday. And when she walks in, they be looking at her sideways. She's a little too drunk, falling over in the doorway. She don't give a fuck, they be talking about her anyway. They're like, "Burr, it's cold in here." She sucked the life out of your atmosphere. I said, "Burr, it's cold in here." Everything's sad and weird. It's me, Debbie Downer. Rain cloud floating all around her. Here and now, saying that girl is too aggressive, too aggressive. It's me, Debbie Downer. Burned out, look a little sour. Here and now, saying that girl is too depressive, too depressive. Oh, like ice. They all talk shit and they love to hate her. Smack, cause they all wanna taste her. Drinking bottles straight to the face, doing hot shit. She's got the show front row, going up in the mosh pit. Like, "Burr, it's cold in here." She sucked the life out of your atmosphere. I said, "Burr, it's cold in here." All black, everything's sad and weird. It's me, Debbie Downer. Rain cloud floating all around her. Here now, saying that girl is too aggressive, too aggressive. It's me, Debbie Downer. Burned out, look a little sour. Here now, saying that girl is too depressive, too depressive. Cold, like ice. Like ice. She's cold. All black, everything's sad and weird. It's me, Debbie Downer. Rain cloud floating all around her. Here and now, saying that girl is too aggressive, too aggressive. It's me, Debbie Downer. Burned out, look a little sour. Here and now, saying that girl is too depressive, too depressive. Oh, like ice. Oh, not so nice.
Yeah, Debbie Downer. Man, I forgot about this song. Well, no, I didn't forget about it. When you listen through something you did a while ago, you get flooded with the memories of, sort of when you were working on it. And this one brings back a lot of memories. It was a lot of fun making this song. I was also reminded of a couple of different little Easter egg things that we can check out too that I think the average bear may not know is actually in the track. So, yeah. Let's dive in. So just to sort of, preface before we get into this, the song was written by a few different people. First of all, it's a collaborative effort between LØLØ and Maggie Lindemann. So they're sort of sharing the artist title. And it was written by DCF, LØLØ, myself, the other producer who I co-produce the LØLØ stuff with, Benjamin Thomas, and of course, Maggie Lindemann. DCF brought the idea in and we all loved it. In fact, I think I made some sort of reference to Footloose or something, because we were first, playing with this idea of having the beat be like the doons da 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 or something, and I said it sounded like Footloose, and then everyone laughed at me. So that's sort of how the song came to be, and then Ben and I kind of went in on the production. So yeah, this is where it ended up. Another thing I should mention is that this is not the mix that you hear on Spotify or streaming services when you listen to the track. The track was mixed by Jay Dufour. So this is just kind of where we ended up before stemming everything out and sending it to Jay. So this is kind of like the raw, uncut session. There is a little bit of pre-mixing going on. I'll usually kind of prepare things before they get shipped off to a mixer. But yeah, Jay kind of did the final polishing on the track in a mix sense. And then mastering, we use Joe Carvalho here in Toronto, and he's never done us wrong. He's an incredible mastering engineer. Highly recommend him. And Jay Dufour, actually. If you need something mixed, go to Jay. And then if you need something mastered, go to Joa. They're the best. So let's jump in here. I feel like the best place to start is with the sort of foundational elements of the track. So invariably, that always means drums. Another thing that's kind of worth mentioning, I think, before we jump in, drums in LØLÖ's music have evolved over the years. When we first started working with LØLØ, we being Ben and myself, we were doing this kind of like straight ahead pop thing. It was very sort of, I don't want to, I'm not knocking it. It was a lot of fun, and it still is incredible music, but it was very sort of middle of the road pop in that sense. And as a result, the drums were very sample based. So when we started getting into, when the direction, musically started changing from this pop thing to being more of a pop punk thing, more of a rock, incorporating rock guitars, things like that, we really needed a solution for drums, because the logistics of trying to get into the studio, like book a studio, get in with a drummer, set up mics, run the song down, get the takes we need, like we lose a day in the studio just to do drums. And with how fast things move these days, with how quickly songs need to be, sort of finalized and put out, that just, it wasn't going to work. So I started poking around for a plugin that could at least get us really close to, a passable drum sound. And in a lot of cases, we just ended up using this plugin on the track because it sounded so great. In fact, there's a little bit of LØLØ trivia if you're interested. There is only one song amongst her released catalog that has live, like, played drums on it by a drummer. I'm not going to say which one it is because I'd love for you guys to try to guess, but there is only one song that has real live played drums on the record, and this isn't it. So basically what we're working with here, and the plugin that I ended up landing on that kind of, changed the scope of our search here, was Addictive Drums 2. I absolutely love this plugin. I think it's brilliant. It's so well designed. I love all of the modules. The EQ is amazing. It's actually very flexible. I love this tape and shape module. The compressor is great. I love this little distortion section. It's just really well thought out. The samples are incredible. Getting over to like the kick and snare, like a lot of these snare samples are just beautifully recorded. The depth in terms of, how many samples are used and the kind of subtlety you can get is just amazing. I really love what they've done with this plugin. If you have heard a LØLØ song that has acoustic drums on it as the primary drum voice, it is this plugin, aside from one song, which I mentioned earlier. So what are we doing here? What's going on with these drums? Well, what I'll typically do for a LØLØ track is, kind of start from a preset. I typically start with this Parametal preset. I just find it works best for rockish drums. I think it's like a Paramore metal kind of thing. They sound like Paramore drums to me. And so those are the Gretsch Round Badge shells, so kick and toms. And then for the snare, I've got just the Tama Bell Brass. The cymbals are the Iversons. And then there's a couple of triggers over here. I'm only using the snare trigger though. The kick trigger is muted. Yeah, there's a little bit of processing on the channels. Nothing crazy, but like I said, this feature set in the plugin really lets you kind of, do some crazy stuff with each track and the samples and stuff. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to loop the chorus here and solo up. This is just Addictive. And yeah, we'll check out what that sounds like. Yeah, just like, rock drums. They sound great. I really love Addictive. Man, I mean, they are addictive. I'm sorry. Everyone's already hit stop on this video. So yeah, we've got Addictive. Another thing I'll touch on too, just with regards to MIDI drums, a lot of comments that we get from drummers specifically. In fact, the drummer in LØLÖ's live band told me that the parts and stuff are they're very much as if a drummer played them. And I play drums a little bit. I'm a guitar player first, but one thing I'm really conscious of with MIDI drums is the fact that they're MIDI drums. In other words, I think, there's a little extra work that goes into programming MIDI drums so as to make them sound like, they were played by a human being. One of those things I find is flams. If you can get the flams right, then you can kind of trick anyone into believing what's going on here. So like up here with these toms, right? Like I've got a considerable amount of space in between each hit. So really dialing in that flam is an important part of the process. Also these snares down here too, like flams on the snares, that stuff goes a long way to convincing your listener that your drums were played by a real person. So I'll spend a lot of time on that. Velocity is also a big one too. Like really, if you have a beat that's very ghost note heavy on the snare, then really kind of getting the relationship between the ghost notes and like the full velocity snares, like those things too can have a lot to do with it. Things like if you've got a hi-hat part that opens up over, the course of like 4 bars, really dialing in each, hi-hat note and making sure they open up in the right spots to sound real. And, those are things I'm really, really conscious of. So that's the main sort of drum bed is Addictive. And I've got a few samples going down here too. The first of which is a kick sample. Now, I do my kick samples a little different than other people I've noticed. There's sort of a reason behind it. Basically, what I would get really hung up on when searching for kick samples is just the sort of audition process for them. So like, you have a folder of kick samples and you start cycling through them like, oh, which one's going to work? And maybe you find one and you bring it in and you start messing with it and you think to yourself, oh man, this is not what I thought it was. And it actually doesn't work. And then you're back to the folder. And there's just a lot of time wasted in, auditioning samples for a kick layer or a snare layer or something. So basically what I conceived of in my mind was this idea that, is there a way of just using one sample for everything? Like just take one sample and can you make one sample work in every context, as opposed to just kind of like, going on a search party for kick drums, every time you're going to layer a kick. And so I came up with this idea of, okay, well, thinking about a kick layer and, the drum that you're layering it over, they're both likely going to be very complex sounds. So in the context of a fully recorded drum kit, the kick drum is a very complex sound, right? Like it's got, transient and attack, high end and low end, but that vibration is also in the room going to vibrate the snares a little. So you're going to get extra high end. And like, there's all of this interplay between, the different drums. You hit the kick drum and your toms, vibrate and ring, things like that. So trying to get two very complex samples to live together is, like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Whereas if you have a very neutral sample, like for instance, an 808, if I zoom in here, is literally just a sine wave. Mathematically, I feel like this has a way better chance of working than something that's, got a waveform that's just all crazy, right? So what I've done, and this is kind of for maybe like 5-6 years how I've been doing my kick samples, is I've taken Ableton's stock 808 kick drum, I've dragged that into a simpler, I've grouped that simpler into an instrument effect rack, and then I've mapped a lot of the parameters in the simpler to the macros on the left in the rack. So what's being mapped is the attack stage of the volume envelope, the decay stage of the volume envelope. We've got the overall pitch of the sample. We've got a low pass filter, and then we've also got the volume envelope parameters. So the decay of the pitch envelope, as well as the amount of the pitch envelope. So that being responsible for like the click and like the attack of the sample. And then I've got two drive sections. One happens before the filter and one happens after the filter. So the one before is just down here in this little drive knob. And then I've just got a saturator after the simpler to beef things up. I've also got a glue compressor at the end. And this is really just to give us a ceiling so that we don't go over 0. But this gives me a lot of flexibility to be able to wrench around and find something that works and not be, searching through folders for the rest of my life. So we've got Addictive soloed up. Let's solo up this kick sample. Actually, I'm going to play Addictive and then I'm going to bring the kick sample in. You'll see what I'm saying. And here's the sample. Yeah, I feel like it's just a lot woofier, a big sort of aspect of how we attack production with LØLØ songs is to try to go as far as possible and then scale it back. So this is a pretty full tilt kick sample. It's very woofy on its own. It sounds like this. Yeah, so just like a super distorted 808 sample. So that's our kick sample and how it's kind of playing with Addictive. Now, another thing I'll do with my kick samples is this white noise thing. I kind of picked this up from Eric Valentine, or at least like the sort of ideological aspects of it. And so basically what I've done is once I get the layer kick MIDI sort of programmed and in the right spot, I'll take all of that MIDI, drag it down to a new MIDI track. And then in that MIDI track, I'll load up a simpler with a burst of white noise in it. And then I'll play with the attack and decay and set them sort of around these values, somewhere around 5 milliseconds on the attack, somewhere around 50 to 70 milliseconds on the decay, and no sustain. And so what this produces is almost like a shaker sound, and that's to layer over the kick sample that we're layering over Addictive. But the crucial thing with this sort of thing is the track delays in Ableton. What I'm doing is I'm moving this white noise track back in time by 200 samples. And so the way the track delays work is that the MIDI is in the same spot, but the program is just firing it off according to this value over here. And so the effect of that is like, it would be kind of like if you had a shaker that was just moved on the timeline a little bit before the initial transient of the kick. And I really like this. It's a very sort of whippy, splatty kind of kick drum sound. And I also liken it to like when you take a stick and whip it through the air and you get that like whoop kind of sound. You're basically getting that on every kick drum. And yeah, it just kind of creates a sense of velocity, like the kick drum's being hit harder than it actually is. I kind of gleaned this from Eric Valentine because he often embraces when, say a hi-hat arrives just slightly before a kick drum does or before a snare drum. And it adds this really cool, like splatty, it's so hard to describe. It's such an intangible sound. Listening to records he's done, the Queens of the Stone Age stuff, you'll hear it all over that record. Gives You Hell by All American Rejects. I think the drums on that song are literally perfect. There's nothing I would change about them. I've sort of adapted what I'm hearing in his records and sort of finding a way to do it in Ableton. So that's our kick drum sample. And then last but not least, we have a snare sample. Alone, it sounds like this. Yeah, it's a very sort of like, drum and bass kind of snare drum. In fact, when I first started producing, I was doing a lot of EDM stuff, house music, drum and bass, dubstep, stuff like that. When that stuff was, at least when dubstep was all the craze. So this sample was something I engineered back from those times. And I find now is, really good. Like all of these samples that I made, back in the day are really, really good as layer samples. They actually work perfectly. So we've got our Addictive, we've got our kick sample, and we'll throw in this snare sample. It sounds like this. Here's no samples. And samples back in. Yeah, just sound great. They kind of, take the kit up a notch, right? We get a little closer to the edge of the cliff. Yeah, that's basically Drumland. There is one other thing over here. This is literally just a resampled kick because when we get to these pre's, the drums get filtered out, but I was feeling like we were missing something. So this is literally just a resample of like a kick and a cymbal, I think. Yeah. Just something to kind of like plant us at the top of that section. Next, what we're going to move on to is bass. So the bass on this track is very simple. The bass we used, actually we used two different basses on this track now that I'm thinking about it. The first one, which is the one we use on most songs, actually I have it here. It's this guy. This is a Squier. It's if you follow LØLØ online, I don't know if you can see it, but it's the LØLØ Sucks bass. This is what we do most of the LØLØ songs on. It's literally a Squier P bass, bone stock. Other than this pickup, this is a Lawler P90 P bass pickup, which sounds insane, by the way. Highly recommend it. Yeah, this is what we end up doing a lot of the LØLØ stuff on. In fact, electric bass on anything I've done has been this bass. The other bass is Matt Malpass's Mustang bass. We were in LA when we were working on this song, and one of the people we worked with, not on this song with, but one of the guys we were working with while we were there was Matt Malpass, and he has this wicked Mustang bass at his studio. And so the second verse, we rewrote the chord changes in the second verse, and so obviously being in LA, we didn't have my bass with us. So we just used Matt's on the second verse. And so there's a bit of a scene change in the bass. Let's just fly into the chorus and we'll take a look at what this bass sounds like. So this is my Squier P bass. Yeah, just like big, dumb P bass. I love it. Like, very rarely do you need anything other than that. Sounds great. Big, grumbly P bass. In terms of processing, not really doing too much here. I do have an auto tune on the bass setting just to kind of keep it steady. If you play stringed instruments, you will know that when you strike a string, the string will momentarily go sharp before it, settles back into its pitch. Because of how much we're digging in on this song, specifically with bass, I threw the auto-tune on just to kind of knock it back into tune for more of the, kind of held note passages. Just so that we have, some better, continuity and we're more locked in with the guitars. So we have a bit of auto-tune. I have a tuner just to see what the auto-tune is doing, just because I hate like the, graph thing that wiggles from side to side and in the auto-tune play. I hate it. I just think it absolutely, it's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. So I've got a little tuner here. In terms of tone shaping stuff, first in line is Saturn. I love this plugin. It works so well on bass and works really well on drums too. And so what I'm doing here is, it's actually kind of another thing I picked up from Eric Valentine. Again, more so in ideology than anything else. But one of the things that you'll hear Eric talk about is the effect that tape has on stuff that you record on it. Basically, the way the frequency response works with tape, and I actually didn't know this until I, started watching his videos. As you move higher in the frequency spectrum, the tape machine distorts the frequencies more and more. So as you go from low to high, your low end is relatively undistorted. As you get into your low mids and your mids, things get more distorted. And then by the time you get up into your high end, everything is like really cooked, which is weird because I always associate sort of like smooth high end with tape, when in reality it's like pretty crushed. So what I'm doing here with Saturn is kind of emulating the same response. So in the low end, we've got very little to no drive. In the mid-range, we've got the knob sort of at 50%, and then in the high end, we've got the knob cranked up almost to full. This gives us kind of, like this sort of, tape-esque kind of feel. So I'm going to disengage the processing, and we'll just kind of throw them on one by one. So here's the bass, no processing, other than the auto-tune, of course. That sounds pretty good. For a Squier P bass, that sounds amazing. So here's Saturn. Yeah. Just like all of the dynamics and details, like hearing the pick on the string, like that kind of thing. All of that starts to come forward with Saturn. Then we've got a little bit of EQ. Yeah, a little bit of EQ, just like a whole whack of sub, 10 dBs of sub. I'm not going to defend myself. That's that's what it needed, I guess. So we've got some EQ going. Yeah, it looks like I'm adding a little bit of sub, dipping some low mids, you know, a little bit of a presence thing going on here with this low pass filter. So yeah, I'm doing some tone shaping here. And then last but not least is this PsyQ plugin. Again, something I nipped from Eric. So this thing is insane. It's pound for pound one of the best EQs you can buy on the market, specifically this mid-range band. It just sounds incredible. You can literally crank this knob all the way up on any one of these frequencies and it will sound, your shit will just sound better. There's no question. So yeah, let's throw the EQ on next. So we've got Saturn in. Let's check out the EQ. So here's Pro Q. Right, so sub. Yeah, some sub, a little more definition in the high end. And then my favorite is the CQ. Check this out. Just that grumbly P bass thing. Like, oh, I love it. It's so cool. So that takes care of our bass for the most part. As I was mentioning, there's a different bass on the second verse. We can check that out too. What we've been listening to has been my Squier P bass. This is Matt Malpass's Mustang bass. Very sloppily played by me, I might add. I mean, it's actually very close in, you know, response to the Squier. I think we had recorded this second verse with the intent to play it on the Squier once we got back to Toronto, but it just never happened. And realistically, I don't think it really would have made that big of a difference. I think this, you know, it sounds fine. It feels like it's part of the track. So yeah, we left it. One other thing I'll mention in Bassland is something we've been doing, I want to say since Death Wish came out. Death Wish kind of represented a very big shift in not only like how crazy we were willing to get with what we were recording, as well as just a tonal shift in the production. But this sort of thing we started doing around that time. Basically what we're doing here is power chords like you would play them on a guitar, but just on bass. That's literally all it is. So we've got a power chord left track and a power chord right track. They're being grouped and processed, but basically they function the same as power chord guitars. So they sound like this. Yeah, so, you know, pretty straight up power chord bass, you know, like who does power chord bass? Like, it's the coolest thing ever. And I think it's, you know, in a production sense, it's actually a really kind of clever decision because it bridges the gap between the bass and the guitars a little bit more. Like, you don't feel like your bass is just this thing way down low and your guitars are these like, you know, ratty, distorted things that are just kind of like smattering all over everything else. This kind of gives the bass a stepping stone up to the guitars and the guitars a stepping stone down to the bass. So yeah, we've started doing this thing when applicable and it just, you know, it makes choruses really pop. I think that's about it for Bassland. There's only one other thing I wanted to show you, and this is just my own, you know, self-indulgence. There's a really cool bass fill near the end of the song I wanted to show you guys, and it goes like this. Just, you know, something different. My idea behind that was, you know, literally just, I think we were just playing this last chorus. Like I was in the studio playing it on the bass and I was just like, no, and like went for something. And Ben was like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, let's keep that. But yeah, idea being that, you know, just to do a little favor for the bass player, you know, give them something cool to play and make them wait for the whole song for it. Actually, there's a really great quote from Chuck Rainey, I think it is, who's an insane session bass player, played on like a bunch of Steely Dan stuff and is just an incredible musician. He said something along the lines of, you know, when he's on a session, he tries to go for as long as he can without playing anything that isn't the bass part. like without stepping outside of it and playing a fill or something. And basically what happens is that it gets to a point where he's held back for as long as he possibly can, and it gets to the point where he has to play something that's, you know, that's not the bass part. And because it's been pent up for so long, just what comes out naturally just ends up working and sounding great. So I kind of liken this, I mean, obviously we're not playing the whole bass part in one pass with a whole band, you know, but yeah, these kinds of things I find are really helpful for making productions that were not tracked as a band sound like they were. Because this is something that, you know, like a bass player might do in the last chorus because, you know, who cares, right? Let's try some stuff. But yeah, it makes it feel more like a band, like the band is kind of like doing things amongst each other and interacting. So yeah, I was pretty proud of that. Pat myself on the back. Nice job, Jordan. Now I think we're good on bass. There's some tracks down here. These are just leftovers from, I think, before we changed the chord progressions. So contextually, they don't really mean anything. But what that does bring us to is guitars, my favorite. I started in the music industry as a live touring and session guitar player, was in bands forever, and then slowly started, you know, making the transition into production. So any chance I get to do guitars on stuff, I love it. It's my favorite. And as you can see, there are a shitload of them, which is, you know, usually the case on a LØLØ track. So yeah, same thing. Let's go top to bottom on these guys and we'll check them out. Here's the intro. I feel like, you know, sometimes talking about this stuff is a little weird because it's like, I don't know, you can kind of see what's going on here, I think, right? But no, I'll talk about it. Basically, there was a choice behind doing this sort of intro guitar. We wanted something that was going to kind of like fake you out a little bit at the beginning of the song. Because, like, you know, for someone who hasn't heard the song yet, you know, they see the title Debbie Downer and, you know, that might be a ballad, or it might be something that's like down tempo, that's like really emotional and, you know, self-deprecating. So we wanted to try to fake people out and make them believe that that was what it was going to be. And then there's just this massive left turn and you get kind of punched in the face a little bit. So yeah, I came up with this. I think this was actually relatively late in the process. I think I did this when we were in LA, like working with Matt Malpass and that kind of thing. I'm pretty sure I played this at the B&B that we were staying at. And yeah, everyone was like, cool, that feels great. And then that leads us right into the main sort of power chord guitars, which is this group. Yeah, amazing. That guitar is, I mean, we cycle through a couple of different guitars. Generally speaking, there's a Telecaster that we use. There's a couple of different Les Pauls that we'll use. Ben actually also has this really amazing hollow body, which is like a combination. It's got this weird name. It's like an ES137 or something. I can't remember what the number is, but it's an ES style guitar. It actually looks like a 175. But instead of humbuckers, it's got P90s, and the thing just absolutely slaps. It's so good. It has made many appearances on a LØLØ record, but these ones are a Tele. In fact, I've got it right here. This guy. This is the one. This Telecaster has been on more LØLØ songs than I can count. It's insane. Also, this was the one, if you saw LØLØ on her recent tour supporting Leah Kate, this was the guitar that she was playing. Yeah, it's literally just a Mexican Tele that I changed the pickups on. I put different pickups in it. I think I changed this bridge too and the pick guard. But other than that, it's just literally wood, strings, and pickups. That guitar is playing these power chords. That's, I think, all we have right off the top of the song is just these two left and right Tele tracks. And then we get to the pre, and those same tracks start doing this like scratchy, like muted string kind of thing. That sounds like this. Yeah, you can tell it's a Tele too because of the hum. That's all we've got going on in the pre. So we're just kind of setting the stage in a production sense. We're not trying to give you too much information right at the beginning. So that kind of stays as is for the verse and the pre. It's just those two telly tracks left and right. Then when we get to the chorus, a couple of things come in, one of which is a center telly track. So these two were, as I said, left and right. This one's center. So we're kind of completing the power chord image. And we also, well, let's listen to that, actually. Man, that guitar sounds good. Oh, man, I'm not getting rid of that guitar. It is just incredible. So that's kind of the main picture of the power chords. We also have this funny little track down here. This was something I sort of nipped from another song. I didn't okay, let me explain. If you were around in the post-punk, hardcore, screamo days of like early 2000s kind of thing, you will probably be familiar with a band called The Used. And they have a song, which I believe was one of their hits, called Buried Myself Alive. And the verses of that song do something very similar to this. So I'll play you the part. Basically, I wanted something like that without plagiarizing the part completely. So I figured out what was going on and then just kind of wrote my own part in that sort of style. So here we go. This is what that is. And obviously it has, some processing and stuff on it. But basically that in conjunction with these power chords, I just love the way they sort of interplay, the way the interplay works and the way they sort of dance with each other. It's really sick. Check this out. Yeah, there's just something about the way they work together, which is really pleasing to me. So yeah, there's a little EQ on that, and then yeah, we just have like some chorus, some compression, a little delay, little SSL channel. Not really reinventing the wheel on that either. So that's kind of the picture of our first chorus, is this little sort of like sprinkly guy and these power chords. Then we arrive at the second verse where Maggie sort of takes over. We also have another guitar that sort of takes over. Basically, as I was saying, we were in LA. We didn't have all of our usual equipment. So Ben and I, actually, there was a day where we just went to Guitar Center and bought a guitar because we were like, we're not about to, try to like phone around town and like see who can lend us a guitar that may or may not work for what it is we're trying to do. So yeah, we literally just bit the bullet, grabbed an Uber to Guitar Center, and we bought this, or rather Ben bought this black Epiphone 335. And it's amazing. It sounds so good. In fact, I loved it so much when I got back to Toronto, I bought one. Except mine has a Bigsby and Ben's doesn't. So, basically, these tracks down here are this 335 that we bought in LA. And I believe it's being put through the diesel. All of these telly tracks up here are the telly through the Marshall Silver Jubilee, I think it is, from UAD. And then the 335s down here, like I said, are through the diesel. I think it's the VH4. But we can take a look at these guys too. So these guys sort of usher in the second verse, and they sound like this. Pretty straightforward stuff. There's a couple of moves going on. Like we have our center track down here that kind of starts the verse off, but then the left and the right kind of fade in before we get the first na 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 na. So you kind of get the stereo picture of the guitar sort of fading in as opposed to just hitting you right up front. So those are, center, left, right. There's another center track that comes in here, and this is, I think, was just for sustain. I recorded the whole part, I think, but we really only needed this last little part to kind of get us through the pre. There's also some octaves that come in. These are the same guitar, the 335. I think they might be through the Marshall. I don't know if these sound like the diesel to me, but they sound like this. Yeah, I think that's a Marshall. With the octaves and the power chords, we have a more sort of complete picture of the harmonic content of the progression. And all of it sounds like this. Yeah, guitars, pretty straightforward, I think, right? There's one last thing over here, and this was something I remember fighting for when we were producing. I just wanted like a little guitar fill, like something really simple that kind of puts the period on the end of the second verse. So that sounds like this. On its own, it's this. Just like a really simple, like, I feel like that's like a Taking Back Sunday kind of vibe, like, I don't know. There's something about it that reminds me of a lot of bands from that era. Okay, so that brings us into second pre, where we're getting this like this sort of footloose, like muted guitar Telecaster that comes back. We've got these octaves ringing out. We've got the 335 diesel combination ringing out. And then there's a couple little extras up here. I think this is just a pick scrape. Yeah, and then we've got more sort of chukka-chukkas over here. Yeah, all of that together, if we just solo the whole guitar group, sounds like this. Yeah, really simple. And then everyone chukka-chukkas into the chorus. Okay, so now we have more stuff going on, right? So each chorus kind of gets added to and built on. So we have the same telly tracks that we had from the first chorus. We continue some of these octaves on their own tracks into the chorus. They're essentially doing the same thing that the verse 2 ones were. So just following the chord progression. Then we start introducing some other things. Down here, there's something we like to call the jangly, or when we put janglies in songs, and they're literally just like a triad or a dyad up high somewhere on the guitar that can have some sort of harmonic continuity through the rest of the chord progression if it's just played and held out through each chord. So that sounds like this. Yeah, just like some high-endy, shimmery kind of stuff, just to kind of open up the guitars a little bit. And then the other thing that gets added down here too is this sort of Buried Myself Alive verse guitar inspired idea that I had done for the first chorus. I do it again, but this time it's an octave above. And I have no idea how I did it. I know that I actually played it because this isn't being pitched. This is an actual audio file that's been played, or recorded rather, of someone playing. I think I capoed somewhere and then figured out a different string to do it on, or something. I can't remember what I did. But basically it's the same thing as this original one, but just the octave up. So both of those together sound like this. And they're pretty loose, right? Like they're not like, gridded or really timed out that much, as long as they work with the main sort of chord progression. And so if we solo up all the guitars again, so this will be the tellies, like I said, the octaves, we've got a little jangly dude going on now. And then we've got the low and high octave of that kind of tappy weirdo part. Or did I mention how it's played? I don't think I did. If anyone cares to know, the way that part's being played, basically what you do is you take your index finger and you hold it over the 12th fret. You don't press down. You're just kind of like fretting the harmonic. And then with this hand, you're kind of like hammering on and playing different notes. But the result is that almost every note you play ends up sounding like a harmonic. That's kind of the party trick of it all. So all the guitars together sound like this. Yeah, just like absolute onslaught of guitar. Yeah, and so we're building up. Things are starting to cook. We hit the bridge, and these Telecasters continue, but I believe they get filtered. Yeah, so on the first half of this bridge, this EQ turns on and filters them. So it kind of gives us, somewhere to go. The filter turns off on the second half. So again, we're kind of like building back up. I believe these are single notes, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Yeah, just something kind of like menacing, like I always find like high played low string single notes on guitar with like, a good amount of drive. It always reminds me of like Yeah Yeah Yeah's Maps, that vibe of just like single note guitar. Like what is like the quintessential single note guitar vibe. And so we thought it would be a good place for that. It's also sort of reductive in terms of like taking a bigger part, like a chord progression, like the power chords or some of the jangly bits, and just literally reducing them to a single note thing. It gives you somewhere to go. So we've got those, and then there's just this chord shot, which I'm pretty sure was like just copied and pasted from, this pre over here. So we hit the shot, we kind of, we're down a little bit, then we start building back up. And then this guitar down here is literally just another power chord part to, again, sort of initiate how we're building back up. That sounds like this. So the whole bridge sounds like this. All right, so we've got those filters, and then they open. And then we get last chorus. So for the last chorus, there's a bit of a fake out at the beginning. We drop our telly tracks, we drop our octaves, we drop our janglies. Everything gets dropped for the first two bars. And we do this really cool like reverse move on the guitars. So down here with these 335 diesel tracks, we hit the main shot at the beginning. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's just this one again. And then what I did was duplicated the first bar of it and then reversed it and faded them together. So you get this kind of like shot, and then it kind of starts to go away, but then it starts coming back really quick. It just creates a really nice like lead in, like momentum for that snare that then I actually just hit my hand on the desk for the snare that then leads everyone back in. It's a really cool like little setup. And then we're into the last chorus. And again, things are just kind of being stacked up as we go. So we have the same tellies, we have the same octaves, we have the same jangly dudes. This group right here, these are the only new things that get added. And if I'm not mistaken, these are detuned guitars. Yes. So what we did here was, and again, this is sometimes a move that we'll make, trying to find a different voice with like the same instruments. Much like with the bass power chords, we were trying to find something that could live between our lowest power chord guitars and the bass power chords. Like, is there something that kind of fits in somewhere? And so what I ended up doing was detuning the low E string on the 335 down to B, so we could get that low B string and then up to the G. So yeah, those sound like this. Yeah, just like really grumbly, weird. They do something huge in the track though. And then we've got our same, the used inspired tracks. And then down here, I think these are just more jangly guys. Yeah, like a higher jangly dude. But really what makes the difference here on this last chorus, I believe, is these detuned guys. So I'm going to mute those for the time being and solo up the whole group. And then I'm just going to bring those guys in. You'll see what a difference they make. Okay, here they come. They just like, they just like complete this picture. Like everything sound like without them, it sounds really kind of almost a little too brash in the high end. And then as soon as they come in, I feel like, oh man, I've got that foundation back. And so, okay, so we get some pick scrapes taking us into the outro. And these are literally just this. You know, pretty straightforward. And last but not least, we have this, it's just a little, like we did this on Hate You a while back, but just like the whole like plugging in the guitar noise. I think that's literally just me taking a patch cord and like, touching it with my finger. But that is it for guitars, I think. I think we've come to the end of Guitar Land, which brings us to vocals. Probably the part that all of LÖLÖ's fans who've been watching this have been waiting for. It's like, just get to the vocal already, you stupid. So here we are, we're in Vocal Land. So what can we say about vocals? The vocals on this song were done in a few different parts. Most of it was tracked in Toronto, or at least the initial stuff was tracked in Toronto. Then we tracked a little bit of it at the APG studios in LA. I think we tracked a bit of it. Did we track a bit of it at Matt's place? I don't think so. I think it was mainly just Loudmouse here in Toronto, which is where we normally work. And then the APG studios in LA. So there was a little bit of, kind of trying to match tones and stuff like that. We didn't really think too much about it. What can we say about vocals? Well, the most important thing about getting a great vocal is making sure you have a great vocalist. LÖLØ is absolutely insane on the mic. She is so consistent. In fact, I would go out on a limb and say that she is the most consistent vocalist I've ever worked with. And if you've dabbled in production, if you've been in a session where vocals are being recorded, you'll be aware of how difficult it is to remain consistent as a vocalist. It is the most difficult thing. Even more difficult than keeping regular or consistent pitch is rhythmically having things be consistent. And LÖLØ is insane at this aspect of being a vocalist. Like we can do 30 takes of the same, verse or something like that. And I kid you not, everything will be perfectly in the same spot every single time. It's really terrifying, actually. So yeah, what can we say about LÖLÖ's vocals? She's insanely consistent. She sounds great. Her pitch is unbelievable too. Like she's going to kill me for doing this, but maybe we'll take autotune off on a couple of things and just listen to raw LÖLØ. But I can guarantee you, anything we listen to is going to sound great without tuning. So what do we use with LÖLØ? Her main microphone is a Peluso U47. That's been the main mic for a long time, since the beginning. That's sort of the main one we use when we're at Loudmouse. When we were at APG, I think we were using a U87. So when we're in Toronto, it's a U47. When we were in LA, it was a U87. In terms of the chain, when we're in Toronto, we use a Neve 1073 for the preamp, and I think that hits a Summit Audio TLA 100. So basically like an LA2A style compressor. And that's it on the way in. I think we were doing something similar in LA, but it was like a U87 into, I don't even know what preamp, probably a Millennia or something, and then into, I want to say it was a CL1B. Very similar, settings in both cases. But that's kind of what we use on LÖLØ. I have a bit of an idea of what our friend Josh used on Maggie. Our friend Josh Murdy ended up tracking Maggie Lindemann because she's in LA. But yeah, what you see in purple here are LÖLÖ's lead vocals. Speaking of Easter eggs, we have a bit of an Easter egg thing here right at the beginning. So in the intro, I don't know if people could hear this on the record. I'm pretty sure Jay brought it back really, really far. And we also delivered it really low. So I'm not sure if there was, further adjustments. But in the intro, you can actually hear LÖLØ singing the melody that's sort of contained within the guitar part if you check it out. So we've got that, right? So if I just solo what she's singing, check this out. Little Easter egg LÖLØ. And I'm just looking at these tracks. I'm pretty sure these were recorded on an iPhone because Aesop, I don't know what Aesop is, but Coffee Commissary is literally right across the street from the APG studios in LA. And we would literally go there like 3 or 4 times a day. So yeah, I'm pretty sure we just recorded those on an iPhone because yeah, you can hear the guitar in the background and everything. So there's a little fun little Easter egg for LÖLØ fans. And then we get into the nitty gritty. LÖLØ V1. Here's what she sounds like.
Everyone's going to the party on Friday. And when she walks in, they be looking at her sideways. She's a little too drunk, falling over in the doorway. She don't give a fuck, they be talking about her anyway.
What can I say? She's an incredible singer. She's got boatloads of vibe, insanely consistent. What are we doing to her vocal? Well, not a lot, actually. There's a little bit of tuning going on. Not very much. She's very in for the majority of it. And then we've got some Shep's Omni-Channel. I really love this plugin a lot. It is pound for pound the best channel strip plugin you will find that isn't trying to do an emulation, that isn't trying to do like an SSL thing or an Eve thing. It does its own thing, and its own thing is so sick. So yeah, we're making use of the saturation in the pre-section on heavy. LØLØ has been craving more and more distortion on her vocals, and so we've obliged in recent productions. We're high passing a little bit at around 200. We've got some EQ, or rather there's this insert too. You can insert different waves effects into this little module in Omni-Channel, which is really great. I have a little RVox going just to kind of tame things before it hits the EQ. Then on the EQ, pushing up a bunch of high end. So like an 8K shelf, pushing that up a good 5 dB, 7.2 wideband, 4.5, little dip at 750, like we're cleaning out, junky mid-range and adding tons of top end. Then that hits a compressor, and then it hits one of these de-esser modules. The de-essers in this thing are crazy too. Really good for like if you need to like notch something out, but then you want to also use it as like a classic de-esser. It's really, really, really great. And then after the Omni-Channel, we're just doing a little more de-essing, because when you distort and then you add high end and then you compress and then you're just asking for trouble in high end. So yeah, we make use of de-essers a lot. But that's it. That's what her lead channel looks like. And as I said, she's going to kill me, but I'm going to deactivate all 3 of those plugins so we can hear what LØLØ sounds like when she recorded the thing. So this is completely raw, uncut LØLØ. Here we go.
Everyone's going to the party on Friday. And when she walks in, they be looking at her sideways.
Yeah, she can sing. Like there, I feel like there's this big oh no, he took the auto-tune off, now she's gonna suck. Like, no. In fact, I have a bone to pick with people who still have this belief that like auto-tune can make someone who can't sing sound like they can sing. It can't. It's not sorcery. It's not some magic bullet for making people sound like they can sing. Get that out of your head, because it's literally bullshit. In fact, I saw the recent Netflix special, This Is Pop, and the auto-tune episode. Number one, they did T-Pain so dirty back in the day. Oh man, I was so enraged watching that episode. But the other thing that kind of pissed me off was the fact that people still think that auto-tune is this magic thing that makes people sound like they can sing, when it's not. You have to be able to sing. If you can't sing and you put auto-tune on your vocal, you're still going to sound like you can't sing. You're just going to sound like you can't sing, but with auto-tune. So it requires someone who knows what they're doing on the mic, and that will always be the case. So yeah, don't at me. Let's move on, because I'm getting angry here, and I don't like being angry. Next in line, also, if you're wondering, why there are different colors of stuff, the purple is stuff we recorded in LA at APG. The orange is stuff we recorded in Toronto, and I believe the yellow is also stuff we recorded at APG. I could be completely wrong about that, but I know orange usually means Toronto, so I'm going to just guess that everything else was in LA. So we get to the pre. This is where we get that sort of like spoken word thing. So you can see in my processing chain, there's no auto-tune because we don't need it. And we're doing this like telephone effect thing. So here we go.
They're like, "Burr, it's cold in here. She sucked the life out of your atmosphere." I said, "Burr, it's cold in here. All black, everything's sad and weird."
From now on, if you see like Shep's Omni-Channel or the de-esser, the Pro DS, it's probably going to be some version of what I showed you initially on her main lead track. And then we get our chorus. Here's LØLØ on the chorus.
It's me, Debbie Debbie Downer, rain cloud floating all around her.
Oh, we're still listening with that. I tricked everyone. Yeah, you didn't realize we were listening without all of our stuff, did you? Okay, let's listen with the sauce.
It's me, Debbie Debbie Downer,
Yeah.
rain cloud floating all around her. Hear him now saying that girl is too aggressive, too aggressive.
Yeah, it's crispy, man. And yeah, there's a lot of noise, like there's a lot of noise creeping up in between the lyrics, I feel like most engineers would like have a heart attack if that's what their lead vocal sounds like. But I think something that's good to remember with this kind of a production and how dense it is, like there's tons of drums that are just like punching you in the face the whole time. And then there's bass, and then there's bass power chords, and then there's another 3 tellies doing power chords, and then this weird like finger tappy thing. And then we've got a vocal that's like totally overcooked. And if something has noise in this context, it's not going to matter. It's really not. So yeah, we've got our noisy lead vocal, and then we've got in this little like pre-post-ish thing, we've got a cold as ice.
Like ice, ice, ice.
And then we get into V2, which is where Maggie takes over. I'm going to do Maggie's stuff separate, but if we continue on, we've got a bridge vocal.
Like ice, ice, ice. Like ice, ice, ice. She's cold.
Last chorus is the same as the other ones, at least for the lead, and then we've got not so nice at the end.
Like ice, ice, ice. Oh, not so nice.
A rare occurrence where we get to hear LØLØ, really yell, which is crazy because she's a very like petite individual, and yeah, hearing that volume come out of such a tiny person is just weird. It's like a cat barking. Anyway, that does it for LØLÖ's vocals for the most part, at least her leads. Then we've got backgrounds. We have a set of doubles left and right. Speaking of consistency, actually, if we zoom in here, you'll see what I'm talking about. Like that level of consistency is nuts. It's crazy. Like most of the time, even something like this is about as off as she'll ever be. And even there, it's like, it's completely unnoticeable. And so that's the thing, like you'll have to in vocal production, what you're looking for when you're tracking it ultimately is vibe. Like, is the vibe right? Is the delivery right? Is it consistent? In other words, are you going to be able to comp from all of these tracks and have it sound like a believable take? And then 3, and what is usually least important to me is pitch, actually, because pitch can very easily be nudged up, like if, you sing an entire vocal line perfectly and the last note is a little flat, just pitch it up. Like if the vibe is right and the consistency is there, why let one tiny little flat note ruin an otherwise great take? It doesn't really, benefit anyone to be subservient to this idea that everything has to be perfect when you're tracking. People make mistakes, get over it. We've got some doubles there, which we can evidence LØLÖ's consistency with. Then we've got some low octaves. So let's check out doubles first.
It's me, Debbie Downer, rain cloud floating all around her.
Yeah,
Hear him now saying that girl is too aggressive, too aggressive.
It's insane how locked in she is with herself. It's nuts. And then we've got some low octaves down here. Let's check those out.
It's me, Debbie Downer, rain cloud floating all around her. Hear him now saying that girl is too.
They're low enough that, the discrepancies in, pitch and stuff like that. This was literally right at the bottom of her range. In fact, the Debbie Downer, like getting down to that note was a difficulty for her. And we almost didn't put these in because she was like, no, I don't want to sing something that doesn't sound, great on a recording. If I can't hit the note, I can't hit the note. And we all collectively agreed that it doesn't really matter because it's a low octave. It's going to be, relatively buried in the track. It's more felt than heard. If note isn't perfectly in pitch, no one's going to care. And they don't. So next we've got harmony.
It's me, Debbie Downer, rain cloud floating all around her. Hear him now say.
This is another great example of like the way we think in terms of harmonies is like the simplest thing is often the best. The least activity we can have melodically with regards to how our harmony works with the the main melody, the better. So we often try to find harmonies that are like one note. Like if we can hold one note through the entire section, or if we can have a part that changes notes as few times as possible, then we'll go with something like that. So we just found the note that worked. and we put it where it needed to be. There's some high harm stuff down here that we didn't end up using, so I'm just not going to show you guys because it, doesn't matter. It's not in the track. There isn't really much else to show you other than these high octave ones that come in a second chorus. So we've got these guys.
Debbie, Debbie Downer, rain cloud, floating all around her. Hear him now, saying that girl is too aggressive.
I mean, that's the only other thing that comes in for the backgrounds. And that should bring us along to Maggie. As I was mentioning earlier, Maggie was recorded in LA by our very good friend and incredibly talented producer and songwriter in his own right, Josh Murdy. He did us an absolute solid and got in the studio with Maggie to do these vocals, and they sound great. In fact, I don't really have anything going on with them. They're all like none of them really have anything. These leads are grouped. I think I have, so I'm doing some stuff. There is a little bit of processing, but it's all very similar to what's happening with LØLØ, actually. Yeah, some stuff. I think these EQ bands are all the same Marvox, same comp. DS are here. Oh yeah, there's some DSing going on up here too. Saturation. Yeah, it's all pretty much the same stuff. So Maggie, what was she recorded with? I'm pretty sure Josh uses a Telefunken Elam 251, and for his I don't know what he's using. I think he might have been using hardware pre's still. He was telling me he recently converted just to like everything UAD. But then after that, he said he was getting a CL1B hardware unit. I don't know what he's doing these days, but I'm pretty sure it was good, whatever it was, because these sound amazing. But I know that he uses a 251 on his vocalists. Yeah, let's check out some Maggie.
They all talk shit and they love to hate her. They really just mad cause they all wanna taste her. Drain a bottle straight to the face doing hot shit. She's at the show front row throwing up in the mosh pit.
Yeah, just, straight up. Great sounding vocals through a great chain. It can all be so simple. So we've got Maggie on that verse. There is a bit of a harmony on that as well.
They all talk shit and they love to hate her.
Again, very distorted. There's a few stacks here too, and these are just on the sort of ends of each phrase.
All talk shit and they love to hate her.
So that's kind of our verse land, and then we've got the Brr, it's cold in here.
Brr, it's cold in here. She sucked the life out of your atmosphere.
Then we've got whispers down here too, actually.
Brr, it's cold in here. She sucked the life out of your atmosphere. I said, brr, it's cold in here.
There's also stacks in here on this one line.
Brr, it's cold in here.
Yeah, just the arrangement of these vocals. I'm pretty sure we had asked Josh and Maggie if they could grab a lot of what LØLØ did in her backgrounds, and I'm pretty sure we had sent those backgrounds as reference. All of these are very similar to what LØLØ had done for her backgrounds. And then we're into the chorus. I'm just going to solo the whole group in the chorus.
It's me, Debbie, Debbie Downer. Rain cloud floating all around her. Hear him now saying that girl is too aggressive, too aggressive.
It's like all the same parts, I think. We've got lead vocal. We've got the harmony on It's Me. We've got the high octaves on Debbie, Debbie Downer. We've got stacks that go through the whole thing, which are just doubles. And then we've got another stack down here. I think this is the too aggressive.
Too aggressive.
Yeah, exactly. And that's our chorus bed. Then when we get to the bridge, LØLØ comes back for the lead. They're both in, but I'm pretty sure it's LØLØ kind of like taking the reins.
Too aggressive. Like ice, ice, ice.
Okay.
Like ice, ice, ice. She's
So Maggie's doing the like ice, 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 but LØLØ's on the or whatever. And then we get back to the chorus. So second chorus, Maggie was the lead. And now we're in third chorus. Maggie is no longer the lead and LØLØ takes over again. But for the very end of the song, they both kind of come back as lead voices to do the not so nice.
like ice, ice, ice. Oh, we, not so nice.
So that's the majority of the vocals. There is one last vocal group down here, which are just gang vocals. I'm pretty sure these were done on our first initial tracking day with LØLØ in Toronto. And these are... Actually, you know what? These may have been done on the day we wrote the song, if I'm not mistaken, because DCF is on these. I don't know. Someone, maybe I'll get LØLØ to either confirm or deny that. But yeah, these are just straight up gang vocals. Yeah, you can see DCF has his own gang groups down here. Gang. And yeah, very similar to how anyone would do some gang vocals. Just get a bunch of people in a room screaming shit, and you've got yourself some gang vocals. So we get...
Too depressive! Too depressive! Cold! Ice, ice, ice! Ice, ice, ice! Cold!
Yeah, pretty representative of what a gang vocal should be, I think. What are we doing with them? Not very much. Sheps, surprise, surprise. Proteus, surprise, surprise. Valhalla Room, just, giving us some room.
Too depressive! Too depressive! Cold!
As opposed to...
Too depressive! Too depressive! Cold!
Right? So we've got a bit of a room action going there. And yeah, that's it for the tracks, the tracks. There's a couple of processing things that I'm doing, which I'll explain before we ship out here. Another thing that I sort of gleaned from Eric Valentine was the idea of separating vocals and music, giving them their own buses before they hit your final stereo bus. And the reason I do this is because one thing I really hate is when... So first of all, I guess to describe how, sort of conventional mix bus would operate is you would have a stereo bus that all of your tracks are going to. So drums, bass, guitars, vocals, everything that's in the session is going to this master bus. And on that bus, you might have a compressor and you might have an EQ and, maybe some saturation or something like that. But the thing that poses the problem is compression, specifically when everything is involved. Because what I don't like is when a vocalist, which is going to be the loudest thing in your track anyway, if a vocalist really leans in on the mic and really digs in, that's going to activate the compressor. But because everything else is also going through that compressor, when it activates, it's going to push all of the music down. And if anything, that's the opposite of what I want to happen. When a vocalist really leans in and the track gets really energetic, you don't want all the music to just turn down. If anything, you want it to lean forward, right? Basically, what I started doing was separating the music and the vocals before they get to the master, and then doing whatever compression I would normally do on a master bus just on the music. So I've got a music bus and a vocal bus. And on the music bus, I have a high pass. This isn't on because I didn't feel like I needed it. I've got a Neve 33609 in mono mode. So it just means the detectors in each compressor are unlinked. So you get, if you get something kind of compressing on the left, it's not also going to compress stuff on the right. And then a Pultec, just adding low end and high end. And that's what's on the music bus. There is nothing on the vocal bus, so that's completely bare. Then we have a couple of sends. One is a rear bus send. If you're familiar with the work of Andrew Sheps, you'll know that this is kind of his thing, or at least something that he's known for doing. I was very fortunate to be able to study under him at the Mix with the Masters seminar in France. He spoke at length about the rear bus and how cool it is, and I can agree. It's one of the coolest things ever. So all that is an 1176 AE, and all we're doing is sending... The way to think about a rear bus is that it's kind of like just a secondary mix bus that, you can chuck whatever you want into. So right now, the drums are going to it, the bass is going to it, and the guitar is going to it. In this case, the vocals do not go to it. Rather, the vocals go to their own bus. But basically what happens with this rear bus is that everything just kind of interacts and mingles together in this bus, and it provides this really wicked interplay between the instruments. On its own, it sounds like this. Excuse me. And if you want to see it working, it looks like this. Yeah, so it's just kind of, it's doing the work that a compressor on a mix bus would normally do, but it's just, a send, and you can mix in as much of it as you want. I think I'm relatively low. I'm mixing it in at minus 14. But there's the rear bus, and then the parallel vocals is exactly the same. It's the same sort of thing, except just with a different 1176, the blue stripe. And this one is just kind of like, I think of it as like a vocal depth kind of fader in a way. So like the more of the parallel vox that you mix in, the closer they get to you in a way. I feel like they really come forward in this bus, and they're just super blown up.
It's me, Debbie Downer, rain cloud floating all around her.
Another thing about this bus is that it's only the lead vocals going to it. So this Maggie leads, that's going to the parallel vox, and then all of LØLÖ's leads are going to that vox bus as well. None of the backgrounds are going, none of the gangs are going either. So that's just lead vocal come forward bus. And then everything kind of sums together in the master track. Again, not really a lot going on here. It's a high pass. I've got this UAD BX digital mastering EQ, and I really love this thing for the stereo width. This is another thing that Andrew kind of hipped me to. It's really amazing. If you're worried about stuff not summing together in mono, this plugin gets around that somehow. I have no idea. Every time I sum to mono, you can have this stereo width like really cranked, and everything sums perfectly, and your balances stay intact, and it's just I don't know what they're doing, but it's incredible, and I use it almost on every track. I'm also doing a little bit of a low end boost here, but this is something I typically won't do. I just needed a place to push up some low end, so I decided that was the place I was going to do it. Excuse me. Last but not least, we have Pro L. I have my ceiling at minus 0.5. That's just to give me some room when it comes to like intersample peaking. Sometimes you'll notice if you bounce, like say you have your ceiling set to like minus 0.3 or even like minus 0.1, like go up as high as you can go. And then you bounce a wave file and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, no, there's a ceiling and nothing's peaking, everything, or nothing's clipping on your meters. Everything looks fine. And then you bounce an MP3 of that same song and all of a sudden you're clipping on all of your meters. And a lot of that has to do with intersample peaking. The reason I go to minus 0.5 is because if I do bounce an MP3 of this song, I stand less of a chance of it actually getting up to 0. It does mean that your stuff is marginally quieter than everything else, but with how much I limit, I don't really think it's going to be a problem. So if we just take a look at this last chorus here, you'll see what I mean.
It's me, Debbie Downer, rain cloud floating all around her. Here and now, saying that girl is too aggressive. It's
Yeah, like we're hitting like minus 4 RMS, which is like stupid loud. So yeah, I'm not exactly concerned about, a couple of decimal points on the ceiling. It'll be plenty loud. Other than that, that's all of the stuff that actually affects sound. This stuff is just some metering solutions I have more so in consideration for my room, because as you can see, I'm in a very small room, and so sometimes, if I've been working in here for like hours on end, you get into fatigue and then your brain starts playing tricks on you and your ears start hearing things that aren't there. And so this is just to keep me in check and make sure I'm not hearing things that aren't actually there. Same with this guy. It's just the same thing, same shit, different pile. And then this utility is just to turn down the output of Ableton so that I'm not destroying everyone's ears on YouTube. And so I can mix in the vocal level on the mic. But that is it, guys and gals and non-binary pals. This is it. This is Debbie Downer. This was a lot of fun. If you made it this far, thank you so much for tuning in and for listening to me blab on about production and LØLØ. But yeah, I really love doing this kind of thing because it takes me back to when we were making this song, and I think every song kind of does that. So it's really nice to like open it up and just be flooded with like memories of making this track, like being in LA and recording these 335s. Like I remember one morning like being in my PJ pants with a bowl of cereal, like doing octaves or something, right? Like those are the things you kind of remember. And yeah, sometimes you don't get your memory jogged until you open up the session. So thank you for watching. If this video was something you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. I'm going to continue making content of this nature, and if it's interesting to you, please subscribe and like the video, hit the notification bell. And if there is a LØLØ song that you would like to see me deep dive on, please request it in the comments. Myself and Benjamin Thomas have been her primary producers with all of her released material. If there's a song you'd like to see broken down in this way, please let me know and we'll do it. Other than that, my name's Jordan. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you soon. Bye.